Hello everyone, Oregon Moto John, and this morning I'm going to take this 350 FE350S, or it's really the same bike as a KTM 350 pretty much, other than maybe the rear shock. But anyway, I just wanted to talk about how I got back to a 350 after going to larger bikes, 890s, which is a great bike, 690 Enduro R, KTM 500 EXE. I've kind of been through the gamut of larger bikes, and now I've ended up back at my 350, which is actually what I started with in the beginning. So I'm going to go for a ride, do a little pavement, do some gravel roads, and I think even a few trails. But I want to talk about how I went through all those different CC bikes, and I ended up back at a 350. So let's go for a ride, and thanks for joining in. Rufus agrees that 350 is a good bike too. He has been a really good bike for me. Frequent oil changes, yes, every 5-10 hours or so, but for the kind of riding I do, mainly off-road, it has been just fun. I'm not scared of doing single track and trails anymore like I was on the larger bikes. I mean, I did it with the other bikes, but it was scary because if you drop the bike, then it was going to be really heavy. But this bike, I'm not afraid of taking it off-road. It's at around 240 pounds. It's easy to pick up. I can do it myself, obviously, so it's great. There's pros and cons to everything, so I'm going to talk about that as we ride. Just a quick note, I'm like 5'6.5", 30-inch inseam, so the Husky has the linkage on the back here, and that does seem to lower the bike down a little bit when I sit on it. The suspension works well for me. I haven't had to, this is just a stock suspension. So a buddy told me that, and that's why I went with the Husky over the KTM, but other than the linkage and the rear subframe, they really are the same bike. So just kind of why I went with the Husky, just so I'd explain that. So let's go for a ride, and I'm going to talk about how I ended up here, the bikes I went through, and then I'll talk about why I like this bike for what I do while I'm riding. So let's go for a ride, and we're going to talk some more about it. 350. Well, how it happened is I started off on I wanted to get in a dual sport riding, and I bought a KTM 350, and I put about 5,000 miles on it, and I felt like I was always wringing its neck. Like I was always having to, at 55, 60 miles per hour, the little bit of pavement I would do, I felt like, man, this thing is really revving. So I didn't keep it that long, and I sold it and upgraded to a KTM 500 EXE, which I loved. It did solve that problem. When you're on highway, it's just sloping along in 6th gear, which was a good overdrive. It's really torquey, and to this day, that is a really great bike. I didn't have any problems with it, no reliability issues, nothing. And I didn't have any trouble with the 350 either. But then, trying to find the perfect unicorn, I put probably about 5,000 miles on that bike, and then I saw the 2018 Enduro R, KTM Enduro R, or Husky 701, same thing, roughly, and I bought that. And loved it. Put about 5,000 miles on that bike. Then they came out with the 2020 Enduro R, which had quick shift, a different motor with less vibration, better suspension. So I bought that. I put about 7,000 miles on that bike. I really enjoyed the 690. The only problem was when I got on the trails, it was a handful. It was just a lot of bike. And so I decided to get something that wasn't so heavy. And what finally put me over the tipping point with the 690 was I fell over in a riverbed, a shallow riverbed, went for a swim. And that bike, when you're on slippery footing, I could pick it up pretty good if I had footing. It was still heavy. But man, in that riverbed, I thought I was going to swamp the bike out, because you can't leave a bike laying on its side in a river. Water goes in places you don't want it. You don't want to hydrolock a motor. So I was scrambling to get up myself. And then when I went to try to get the bike up, it was hard. It was so heavy, I couldn't believe the weight of that bike when you're on slippery footing to try to lift that bike up, it was really hard. So I didn't sell it right away. The 890 came out, and I got a 890, a 790 for a little bit, then an 890 Adventure R. Loved that bike. I didn't have any issues with it, thankfully. But then I found my buddies were doing single track, and I really liked riding off-road, and I was always finding myself on my 890 in predicaments that made me nervous. I never dropped the bike, but I sure could have. I jumped logs with it, all kinds of stuff. So then I wasn't riding my 690 much anymore. So I sold my 690 and I kind of flipped it for this Husky 350. I was back in 22. And obviously I still have my Husky. I love it. I don't have any intentions of selling it. It's been a really good bike. And why is and then when it was time to ride, I never took my 890 anymore. Not because the 890 was a problem bike or I didn't like it, but it was just more fun for me to be on more of a, kind of have what I call a dirt bike experience. And so I sold my 890 and I've been driving my 350 on and off ever since. So that's kind of my story. For me, a lightweight bike means a lot. I am looking at adding another bike to the fleet, which would be somewhere in the middle. Still lightweight, but a little heavier than a Husky, so stay tuned to see what that is. It will also be a dual sport. But I have no intentions of getting rid of my 350 because it's such a good bike. Like today, I'm meeting someone to ride trails, and this bike will do that. In fact, you'll see me on some trails today. And I'm on pavement now. But for this bike to zip along at 60 miles an hour on the pavement, I do feel like I'm bringing its neck a little bit. Here I am going about 55 and it's fine and I can go faster, but the bike's just going to turn some RPMs. I'll only be on this pavement for maybe 4 or 5 miles, maybe 6 miles, and then I'll be on gravel roads, and then I'll be on trails, so I don't mind it for something like this. So where the 350 excels is gravel roads, single track trails. You wouldn't want to run it down pavement for miles and miles and miles. So that's how I got back to this bike. That's kind of my story. I hope it helps someone to keep her from going through a lot of bikes. If you weren't going to do single track, I'd say the 690 would be a really good bike to have. If you're not going to do, or the 890, or even a larger bike, a Yamaha Tenere 700 is a great bike. So there's lots of bikes. I'm not trying to make a list here of what the best bikes are, but just kind of my experience. We're around 37 degrees, and this bike doesn't have wind fairing, any kind of fairing on it, and I'll tell you what, you feel it when you're buzzing down the highway. So the 890 was great for that. If you're going to do much on the highway, having a little fairing, or a mid-size dual sport with a little bit of a fairing, that would make a difference. So always consider just look at the purpose of your bike. Are you going to do a lot of highway miles with it? Or are you going to do a little highway and more trails and roads? And that'll steer you where you want to go, because with dual sports, everything's a compromise. And I didn't quite understand how it all works, so I went through a lot of experimentation to get there before I really figured out what I like, what bike will do what. And anyway, so start with your starting point should be, what am I going to use this bike for? Bike comes alive is when you start getting off-road, which is mainly what I like to ride. So here's some off-road here, into a gravel road, and oh man, now I feel like this thing wants to rip. Really feels comfortable off-road. And I was worried about a 350 not having enough power. And this bike has plenty of power. I do have a Takamoto SX1 Athena Get ECU on here with the 2 maps. So you know, there is that, but I rode it for 2 years without that, and had a EJK fuel controller on it, and it worked great, just with the M cap and the stock exhaust. Boy, it is foggy up here today. We'll see how this goes. Hoping I can get above the fog. But this bike has plenty of power, plenty of torque, plenty of high-end rev. It's the 350 motor. I think it's one of the most underrated motors for KTM, Husky, Husqvarna. It's just very revvy. It has decent torque. It has good mid-range, and it'll pull all the way up into the top end and just rev and rev and rev. Since I'm on roads here, I'm just using the torque of this, but it'll just keep revving if I wanted to. Really foggy today. And I've never run out of power on this bike. I weigh 200 pounds, 190, probably 200 pounds with gear. Sometimes a little lighter, sometimes a little heavier, but this bike's got plenty of power for me and what I'm doing. Yeah, will I be able to get above this fog today? I don't know. We'll see. I'm going up in the mountains, and sometimes you pull above the fog, and sometimes you're just basically driving in the clouds. So you just never know. Right now, looks like I'm going to be driving in the clouds. Maybe as I go up in elevation. But the main thing I wanted to catch was this motor. It revs so high. You can run it from down low, and it'll just keep revving. So here's an example of I start off in a gear and it just revs. I gotta be careful, it is icy here. You can see the frost on the side of the roads. The water's now frozen, so it's definitely cold up here today. Heated grips are saving me. Thank you, Oxford Grips. But that motor just revs. Oh, one con on this bike is I like the suspension. I love the motor. The suspension is stock, but the brakes, the rear brake's adequate. The front brake is adequate as well. It's fine, but it's a brake tech brake. On the KTM, you get the Brembos typically, which modulates so nice. So I do have plans, since I'm keeping this bike, I'm going to swap out that caliper and front master cylinder for a Brembo for the 350 KTM. I don't think I'm going to worry about the rear brake at this point, but the front one's got to go. And it's adequate. I've driven it 2 years. I've done all the terrain, done all the things. It's just really, I don't know, feels numb to me. Feels like it's not very powerful. I'd rather have a powerful brake that I get to modulate than a weaker one that I feel like I have to squeeze on. And that's just what I'm used to. All my other bikes have probably spoiled me. I'm just used to good brakes. Hey, we broke out of the fog. Awesome. Okay, well, let's I'll tune back in as we get up towards the trailhead for some trails. Right there, all the views we get. Those of you who ride, you know what I'm talking about. Look at this, beautiful up here. And look at that thick fog. It's like pea soup, but it just goes to a certain elevation and then it stops. And now we're in the sunshine. Let's ride. .300 there, Beta 300, and Luke on the Beta 200, really nice bikes. Those are beautiful bikes. Those are beautiful bikes. I love the Beta colors, and Luke was kind enough to let me try his 200, which might be hard to turn down, but I'm scared. I don't want to buy another bike. That's my rule of thumb, is don't ride a bike unless you want to buy one, because they're so much fun. So this is, you know, single track here, and this is where a 350, I can go up here and I'm totally fine. There's roots and ruts and everything else, and this bike will get up that. I mean, it's great. Like on a bigger bike, I'm scared to death up that. It's so nice to be able to do the trails on this bike and feel very comfortable. Whoa, this is no 300 though. And it is slick today. And you can ride pavement, and then I can come up here and still do trails, and it's okay. It's actually pretty comfortable. Just nice and smooth. Pick your lines. I'm not fighting the weight of the bike. I can correct if I need to. Just real nice and flowy. Oh, I flamed out. So I did flame out there, but that was all me. This bike does flame out a little easier than, say, a two-stroke would. This section has some super slick roots and things. Just have to ride real careful. It's kind of a little more tore up than what I'm used to. So here's some of the wet roots and things here. And 350 just dances its way through that, no problem. I do a lot of feathering of the clutch on a 350. Seems to be a good way to modulate the speed. But it's a good bike. Little uphill here. Bike's real torquey. Has first gear if I do want a tractor. Whew. And if you need to rev it out, it'll has low end, top end. Just a good fun bike. Woo. Woo. Good job. Feeling good. You guys are just cooking. Gonna do a little special test action. This is definitely loose. Ooh, that was a steep hill climb. But lots of fun. Second gear on this bike. Really kind of tight in here, but pretty comfortable on the 350. Definitely tight. This bike just skips along through here just fine. Nice to be able to not have the weight of the bike holding me back too much. And it rolls through here really nicely. Woo! Almost whiskey throttled that. Got a little acceleration and that caused me to twist my throttle, and then I got more where I really didn't want it. Go ahead. These Betas are such nice bikes. I love them. The only thing I don't like about them is they're hard to keep up with. So lightweight and nimble, they just get the business done. And it is muddy up here today. Ooh, definitely muddy. Good tires are a must in stuff like this where you're mud, and it's a little more packed down, and it's muddy. But it's a great day to be alive. It's a great day to be out here riding with some buddies. Love it. Like I said though, these Betas, they just have a way of slipping away from you. Probably not quite as nimble a bike on the 350 as my 300, but it's close. And that's probably just driver, what I'm used to on my part. I feel like my 300 is slightly lighter. Can't remember what the specs are on it. But up here, light is right. Of a bike that you got to weave in between the trees. Love the sound of a two-stroke. They sort of a nice little roost there. It's just nice to be able to come up here on the highway and then ride with these guys. I really like that. Low bridge. A little bit of an uphill here. Always sometimes I feel like I'm stuck between a gears. Second gear is a little luggy, torquey. First gear is a little low, but generally second gear is what I like to run up here. There's a lot of trees up here, and I don't want to kiss one. Oh boy, lost my front end for a second there, but I got it back, so I'm happy about that. Lots of fun. That's a mud hole. Dunk. It could. I mean, you didn't get it in your hub, but you were about basically almost up to your hub. You could see where it dipped your sprocket. That's the SC1. Lots of fun. I didn't know a lot about betas, but since I've been riding with these guys, I really like them. They're nice bikes, they're well built. I like the colors. They perform well, they're lightweight, they're good for trails. But I guess I'm talking about the 350 today, so I'll get back to that. But I really love the 350. It's just a very do-it-all friendly bike, I guess. I mean, the fact I was able to drive up here on pavement today, pulled out of my garage, and now I'm on pretty technical single track, riding with some buddies. I think that's pretty amazing, and I'm not uncomfortable up here. I'm not worried about if I drop the bike. I definitely can pick this bike up. Its suspension does everything I need it to do up here. Kind of in second gear, just lugging along, feathering the clutch a little bit. Oh, tree down. Just enough of a down tree to be inconvenient. But that's a perfect example. I did a log crossing today, went around a log, and I'm comfortable on this bike doing that. It helps if I put it in gear, I guess. This is a good little section, but it's got some uphill. There's this little section here that's always a little tricky. There we go. I usually do that in second gear, and I think that got me off a little bit. But once you're through that, it's just fine. I guess that's what I like about the 350. I can rev it out, or I can just lug it around a little bit. Man, but up here, less weight is a good thing in all aspects. Some roots. I'll hit it, go around them if I can. I'll hit them perpendicular if I can. If I can't go around them, or sometimes you can find where it goes up by a tree, and then you can go up and around them where there's some dirt by a tree. There's lots of ways of handling those. But I do like this Takomoto map. It's transformed my bike with this SX1 ECU for Athena. Yeah, the trail map is nice and smooth. It's not jerky, and it has made this bike much more enjoyable to ride up here. The throttle isn't so on and off. Got whipped in the face by that branch. It's not all that uncommon up here though. Main thing about riding up here is just keeping your weight balanced. Stay in the center of your bike so you're not loading your front wheel or your back end too much. I think he's thinking about a pivot turn. He's thinking about it. Oh, he's getting close. Oh, almost. You basically had it that one time you did one. I don't have it. I'm moving out of his way. It's close. You got it that first time. That's what's so cool with a dual sport bike is I can ride from my garage, come up, say hey, ride a little bit, and I'm gonna head on back. I'm not gonna. I took the trails up. I'm gonna take the gravel roads back because I'm riding by myself and I want to make sure I get back okay. And I can take the trails. I guess if I get lost, I can take the trails, but this is just an easy way for me to find my way back. A logging road, and here's a trail. It's like, well, where does this go? Next thing you know, you're just going up a little single track action here, and oh, and it's just fine. Dodge a few logs. And piece of cake. Pretty nice. I love how I can do that with this bike, and it wasn't sketchy, wasn't scary. Just a piece of cake. Then went from gravel roads to single track, and now here I am back to pavement. Here I am on pavement, having a good ride. Bike feels good. Then I'll be turning off and going back to gravel roads again. And I'll just work my way all the way home. And this 350 will do all of that. So really a do-it-all bike. But emphasis on gravel roads and trails, especially on trails. If you're gonna do a lot of pavement, buzzing down the highway, I wouldn't say it'd be the bike of choice. But it can do it for a limited amount of mileage, and you'll be very, very happy. And it really feels like a supermoto bike on the pavement here. I'll tell you, that's 690 at R on the pavement. Holy cow, that was a fun bike. There's that quick shifter and lots of power on tap. It was a blast. It was a blast. I rode it up here. It was a blast on everything up here except for everything but the tightest trails. Then it started to feel its weight a little bit. It wasn't as fun. Showcase this motor, what I'm trying to show what it does on the trails. So I come out of this corner here, and this bike was just rev, and it had more to give there, and then it just revs more. And so it's just a nice little gem of a motor. Log crossings and things used to make me really nervous on some of my other bikes, just like what I did on my 890. I mean, I did it, and it never did go bad, which I was grateful for, and I did quite a few of them, but I was always nervous if it did go bad, what it was going to look like with the size of the bike and my short legs, and just, you know, kind of just wondered, well, how's that gonna turn out?
is the bike gonna land on me? And anyway, none of that ever happened, so maybe they were unfounded fears. But with this light bike, I'm not worried about it. I did a few log crossings today, or jumped over a few logs, and it wasn't a big deal. I wasn't worried about it. So that's pretty nice, something you can drive on the highway from your garage and do a few log crossings, and it's okay. And I like to be able to skim my front end across something if I need to. This is lightweight, it's got plenty of power, but so if I need to get my front end lofted over something, it's just a blip of the throttle and it lightens up and over it you go. Back to gravel, still just working my way home. And out that ocean of fog over there. It's cool how the mountaintops stick up through it. Kind of the view you get when you're looking out of a plane. Such a nice day to be out riding. But the Athena Get ECU really did transform this bike. It's like I bought a second bike when I bought it, because it's transformed this bike so much. It's just so nice to ride. It was fun to ride before, but it's just changed how responsive it is, or giving me options on how responsive I want it to be. Because you have the trail map that's smooth, and you have the Baja map that's a little more aggressive, gives you all the power, so it's fun to be able to switch back and forth and have traction control when you need it, which I was always an anti-traction control person, but I'll tell you what, it works so well you don't even feel it working. I like to run mine on a 5 or a 6, so it gives you quite a bit of slip, but it's not going to let me really break loose and just sit there and spin. It was a dirt bike. You want to spin those tires a little bit. It's a very stable bike. Its speed. Back down into the fog again. We rode up out of it. Now we're riding back down into it. Approaching the valley floor. So, I guess in summary of the 350, inflated dirt bike, frequent oil changes, smaller fuel capacity, 2 gallons, but adequate if you carry a gallon and you have fueling capabilities. Brakes on the Husky are okay, they're fine.